She collapsed in the middle of the street, drenched by the rain, while everyone walked past her as if she didn't exist. But in that moment of cruelty and indifference, a powerful man stepped forward, one whose touch would change her life forever. Torn between love, betrayal, and the fight for survival, Maya's story is about scars, secrets, and a choice that could redefine everything. If you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds, comment, "Love always wins." The plaza was alive with chatter and movement, yet for Maya it felt like walking through a graveyard of memories. She lowered her head, clutching the ends of her scarf so tightly around her bald scalp that her knuckles turned white. The scarf was her fragile shield against the cruelty of strangers. But shields can't silence laughter. It started as a whisper, then grew louder, bolder. Someone giggled, another pointed. Soon, the sound of ridicule filled the air. "Look at her!" a voice sneered from the crowd. "She looks like a ghost." Maya's chest tightened, but she kept walking. She had learned that silence was her only weapon. If she didn't react, maybe they would lose interest. But deep inside, every cruel word etched itself into her already fragile heart. She was 24, too young to feel this old, this forgotten. Once she had been a burst of life, lighting up every room she entered. Cancer had stolen that light. It took her hair, her strength, her laughter. Worst of all, it stole people. Her friends stopped calling when the hospital visits became too frequent. Her father avoided her gaze at dinner, and her mother's hugs, once warm and fierce, had turned heavy, filled with sorrow she never spoke aloud. That night, waiting on the metro platform, Maya stood alone, trying to blend into the shadows. But cruelty finds its target. A group of teenagers spotted her. "Hey, Baldy!" one shouted, and the others erupted in laughter. Another pulled out a phone. "Smile for the camera." The flash burned her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she felt tears threatening to fall in public. She bit her lip hard to keep them inside. If she cried, she would only give them more reason to laugh. But among the cruel voices and careless faces, one pair of eyes stood apart. At the edge of the platform, a tall man in a dark suit leaned against a column. His posture was commanding, his presence undeniable. He didn't laugh, he didn't mock, he simply watched. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was unwavering, like he was seeing something no one else cared to notice. Maya didn't see him, not yet. But he saw her, and he didn't look away. Adrian Cole had long ago mastered the art of silence. In boardrooms, his stillness intimidated competitors. In negotiations, his lack of reaction unsettled rivals who were desperate to read him. He was a man who built an empire not through noise, but through the sharp precision of listening. That night, standing at the metro platform, he had done the same. Listened, watched, calculated. But this time, it wasn't about business. It was about her, the girl with the scarf, the one whose eyes held a quiet desperation that cut deeper than any insult thrown her way. He saw the way her lips trembled as laughter echoed around her, though she fought to hold her composure. He saw her fists clench inside her coat pockets, as if willing herself not to break. Adrian had no idea who she was, but something in him refused to look away. The train screeched into the station, drowning out the jeers of the teenagers who had mocked her. She stepped into the carriage quickly, head still bowed, as if rushing to escape, not just the crowd, but the entire world. When the doors closed, Adrian's reflection appeared in the glass opposite him, and for the first time in years, he wasn't looking at himself with cold detachment. He was still seeing her. He didn't follow her that night. He could have. He had the means to follow anyone, to know everything, but he didn't. Instead, he went home to his penthouse overlooking the city, where the lights blinked like stars, unreachable and cold. He poured himself a glass of scotch, sat in his leather chair, and thought of her face. Who was she? For days, the question lingered. He told himself it didn't matter. He had bigger concerns, contracts awaiting signatures, lawsuits threatening his company, enemies waiting for him to stumble. Yet every time he tried to focus, the memory returned. The image of a young woman walking like a ghost through laughter and cruelty. It had been years since anything touched him. He was known as the man without a heart in the business world, and he had worked hard to cultivate that reputation. Feelings were liabilities. Attachments made men weak. He had learned that lesson long ago, carved into him by a past he never discussed, a past he buried beneath wealth and iron discipline, and yet he couldn't bury her. 1 week later, Adrian made his decision. He had people who could find her. It took less than 24 hours, a name, an age, a hospital file that detailed too much. Cancer, ovarian, advanced. Treatments had stripped her of her hair, her vitality, but not her dignity, not yet. Her name was Maya Bennett, 24 years old, unemployed now, living alone in a small rented flat 2 train lines away from the hospital where she spent most of her days. He read the file in silence, each detail cutting into him in a way he hadn't expected. He closed the folder with more force than necessary, shoved it aside, and told himself to stop. It wasn't his problem. He was Adrian Cole. He didn't involve himself in strangers' lives. But that night, for the first time in years, he couldn't sleep. 2 days later, Maya was lying in her hospital bed, staring at the bland ceiling when a knock startled her. A nurse entered, carrying an envelope. "This was delivered for you," she said, placing it on Maya's lap before leaving. Maya frowned. She rarely received mail anymore. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a single ivory card. No sender, no explanation, just 2 words written in bold ink. "I see you." Her brows furrowed. Was it a cruel joke? Some stranger mocking her again? She tossed the card aside and tried to forget it, but she couldn't. The words followed her all day, even as she sat through another exhausting round of treatment, even as she forced a smile for her weary mother. "I see you." The next morning, walking through the park near her clinic, she felt it again, that strange sensation of being observed. Turning sharply, she caught sight of him. A tall man in a tailored coat, standing beneath a tree. His eyes were on her, steady and unflinching. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He simply watched. Her heart skipped. She quickened her pace, unsettled, but something about his gaze lingered in her mind. The following day, she spotted him again, this time near the cafe where she bought tea after appointments. He was across the street, his hands in his pockets, watching as cars rushed by. Again, no words. Just those eyes, fixed on her. By the 3rd time, Maya was angry. Outside her doctor's office, she caught him standing by the corner, pretending to look at his phone but failing miserably. She stormed across the pavement, her scarf whipping in the wind. "Why are you following me?" she demanded, her voice sharp though her body trembled. Adrian looked up, caught off guard by her sudden boldness. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply studied her face, as if memorizing it. Then, calmly, he answered. "I'm not following you," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "I'm watching." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "That's supposed to make me feel better," she snapped. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, touched his lips. "It's supposed to make you feel seen." Maya froze, her breath catching. Those words echoed the message on the card. "I see you." Her anger faltered, replaced by confusion. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Adrian hesitated. For a man who always had answers ready, who could turn lies into truths with a single sentence. The weight of her question pressed on him differently. He didn't know how to explain the restless nights, the way her pain had pierced through his carefully constructed armor, so he said the only thing he could. "Nothing." Maya blinked, unsettled. Nothing. People always wanted something. Pity, gratitude, to feel superior. But he stood there, expression unreadable, as if he truly meant it. Shaking her head, she turned away. "Stay away from me," she muttered, walking quickly back toward the hospital entrance. Adrian didn't follow, but he didn't leave either. He remained where he was, eyes fixed on her until she disappeared inside. That night, Maya lay awake in her small apartment. His words repeated in her mind. "It's supposed to make you feel seen." She hated how they made her chest ache, how they filled her with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. Why her? Why now? The following week, the sightings continued, sometimes across the street, sometimes in a waiting room, always distant, never closer than a few steps, never speaking again. It was unnerving, but also strangely comforting. As much as she wanted to resent him, part of her felt less alone knowing someone's eyes were on her, not with pity, not with cruelty, but with something else she couldn't name. One rainy evening, leaving the clinic drenched and exhausted, she caught sight of him again. He was standing by the curb, umbrella in hand. She wanted to yell at him, to demand again why he was doing this. Instead, she surprised herself by whispering, almost too quietly to hear, "Who are you?" The wind carried her words away, but she didn't realize he had heard. Adrian stood beneath the storm, silent, his cold eyes betraying the faintest glimmer of warmth. For the first time in years, he felt something dangerous stirring inside him, and he knew this was only the beginning. Rain hammered down on the city with a relentlessness that seemed almost personal, like the sky itself was bent on washing away everything beneath it. Maya stumbled out of the clinic, her steps uneven, her body trembling from exhaustion. The treatment that afternoon had drained her to the point where even breathing felt like a chore. Her scarf, soaked through, clung to her head, plastering itself against her skin. She tried to hurry across the street, but her legs buckled beneath her weight. She went down hard onto the wet pavement, the taste of rain and blood mixing as her lips split against the ground. Pain shot through her arms as she tried to push herself up, but her body refused to cooperate. People passed by, men in suits, women clutching umbrellas, teenagers running for cover. Their eyes slid over her like she was nothing more than a puddle on the ground, an obstacle to avoid. No one stopped, no one cared. The humiliation burned deeper than the physical pain. She lay there, gasping, rain pounding her body as strangers kept moving, indifferent. Her chest tightened as tears threatened, but she forced them down. She had cried enough. Then suddenly she felt hands, strong, steady, unyielding, lifting her from the ground. The touch startled her, so different from the careless shoves she had grown used to when people brushed past her without apology. She blinked against the rain, her vision blurry, and when her gaze finally cleared, she saw him, Adrian. He was kneeling beside her, his suit drenched, his hair plastered against his forehead. He didn't seem to notice. His entire focus was on her, his eyes scanning her face with an intensity that left her breathless. "Maya," he said, his voice low, firm, steady despite the storm raging around them. "Look at me." She did. "You don't deserve to be invisible." The words cut through her defenses, slicing deeper than she expected. No pity laced his tone, no hollow sympathy like she'd heard from doctors or family. His voice carried conviction, like he was speaking a truth she had long forgotten but desperately needed to hear. Her lips parted, trembling. "Why? Why are you doing this?" she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he slipped an arm beneath her shoulders, another beneath her knees, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. She gasped, instinctively clutching his lapel. "Put me down," she protested weakly. "I can walk." "You collapsed," he said firmly, his eyes meeting hers. "You need rest." She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't some fragile doll, but her body betrayed her, slumping against his chest, grateful for the strength she lacked. His scent, clean, sharp, faintly like cedar, filled her senses. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to lean on someone. He carried her into the clinic lobby, ignoring the surprised stares of staff and patients alike. The receptionist stood, mouth agape, but Adrian's presence silenced any questions. His voice, cool and commanding, broke through the room. She collapsed outside. "Get a doctor." Within moments, nurses swarmed around her. Adrian reluctantly set her down on a wheelchair, his hand lingering at her shoulder longer than necessary. Maya, overwhelmed, avoided his gaze. She hated being seen as weak, yet his eyes didn't make her feel small. They made her feel noticed. Hours later, after tests confirmed she was stable, Maya returned to her small hospital room. She expected him to be gone. Men like him didn't wait. But when she opened the door, there he was, leaning against the wall, his suit jacket draped over a chair, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable as always. "You're still here?" she asked, incredulous. He looked up at her, his eyes calm but piercing. "You fainted in the rain. I wasn't going to leave you on your own." Maya sat slowly on the bed, staring at him. "Why, you don't even know me?" Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating. Finally, Adrian spoke. "I know enough." She frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "Not everything does," he replied, his tone final, shutting down any chance of explanation. Maya wanted to push, to demand answers, but exhaustion weighed her down. She turned her face away. "You should go." "I don't need a babysitter." For a moment, she thought he would. Instead, she heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. He sat, pulling a book from his coat pocket. "Then I'll stay," he said simply. Her head snapped toward him. "What? Why?" His eyes remained on the pages. "Because you shouldn't be alone." Her chest tightened. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. She lay back against the pillow, her eyes fixed on him as he read in silence. She didn't know why, but for the first time in months, she felt safe. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm she hadn't expected. Adrian began visiting regularly. Sometimes he brought books, novels, biographies, even astronomy guides. Other times he carried strange teas in glass jars, claiming they had calming properties. Maya eyed them suspiciously. "You don't actually expect me to drink this, do you?" A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "It won't kill you," she raised a brow. "That's a pretty low bar." But she drank anyway, and to her surprise, the warmth soothed her. They talked, or rather, she talked, and he listened. She told him about her childhood dreams of becoming a painter, about the sketches she used to fill notebooks with before her hands trembled too much to hold a pencil for long. She told him about her sister, gone too soon, and the silence that had haunted their home ever since. Adrian rarely spoke of himself. When she pressed him, he deflected with questions. "You've been everywhere," Maya guessed one afternoon, watching him pour tea. "Haven't you?" "Some places," he admitted. "And?" "They're just places," he said. She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." But beneath her frustration was curiosity. Who was this man who appeared from nowhere, who watched her with eyes that saw too much but revealed so little? Slowly, her laughter returned. The sound startled her the first time it escaped her lips, awkward and rusty. Adrian looked at her then, really looked, and for a fleeting second, the cold mask on his face cracked. His eyes softened, warmth flickering in their depths. "Your laugh suits you," he said quietly. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because," she faltered, words failing her. No one had said anything kind in so long that she had forgotten how to respond. But kindness couldn't protect them from reality. The world had a way of intruding, tearing through fragile moments of peace. It started with whispers in the hospital corridors, curious glances at the suited man who visited a dying girl every week. Then came the first photo, grainy, snapped on a phone, uploaded to social media. A billionaire seen entering the oncology ward. The comments were ruthless, speculations swirled. Charity case, publicity stunt, sugar baby. Maya saw the headlines one morning on a discarded newspaper. Her chest constricted. She felt the old shame flooding back, the same humiliation she had endured on the plaza, magnified now for the world to see. That night, sitting across from Adrian, she slammed the paper onto the table. "Do you see this? They think I'm your project, your pity experiment." Her voice cracked with rage and despair. Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. "Ignore them." "How?" she cried. "When it's everywhere, when people look at me and see nothing but your charity?" "Maya," he said firmly, leaning forward, "you are not charity." Her eyes stung. "Then what am I to you?" The silence that followed was deafening. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though the truth was too dangerous to speak. And in that silence, Maya's heart twisted with fear. Because as much as she wanted to believe him, the world had already chosen its story, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough to fight it. The storm didn't come all at once. It began as murmurs in the corners of hospital hallways, whispers among nurses who couldn't resist a story, and stares from patients who recognized the sharply dressed man who never left Maya's side for long. But whispers have a way of growing, of spilling out into the streets, into newsrooms, onto glowing screens that fed on scandal like hungry mouths. One morning, Maya walked into her clinic and froze. Two women sat in the waiting room with a tabloid spread wide between them. On the front page was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Her, head down, scarf wrapped tightly, walking beside Adrian Cole. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Billionaire falls for cancer patient." Maya's throat went dry. She wanted to rip the paper from their hands, tear it to shreds, deny every word. But she couldn't, because the image was real, and no matter how false the narrative, the world would believe what it wanted. By the afternoon, more headlines appeared online, charity or romance. The mystery woman in Adrian Cole's life angel of pity. Tech mogul's visits raised questions, and then came the crueler ones, buried in the comments and whispers, but sharp enough to cut her open. Gold digger. Fraud. She's dying. Why else would he bother? Her phone buzzed endlessly. Old acquaintances she hadn't heard from in months sent messages dripping with curiosity, disguised as concern. "Is it true?" they asked. "What's it like, being with him?" As if she owed them an answer, as if her pain had become public property. That night, she sat across from Adrian in her hospital room, her hands clenched in her lap. The paper lay between them, its headline screaming at her like a personal accusation. "Do you see this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with fury. "They think I'm your project, your pity case." Adrian's expression remained unreadable, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. He reached out, pushing the paper aside with deliberate calm. "Ignore them. Ignore them," she let out a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to be humiliated in front of strangers every day, to have people look at me and see nothing but a headline?" His eyes locked on hers, steady, unflinching. "Yes." The quiet conviction in his voice silenced her for a moment, but confusion and anger churned in her chest. "Then why put me in this position? Why come here or why follow me? Why drag me into your world if this is what it brings?" He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Because you are not charity." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "Then what am I to you?" The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. His lips parted as though he might finally answer, but he closed them again. For the first time, Adrian Cole, so controlled, so calculated, looked uncertain. Maya shook her head, the pain too much to contain. "You can't even say it, and now everyone will think I'm nothing but a fool who let herself be seen with you." She turned away, tears sliding down her cheeks. Adrian didn't move, didn't reach for her, though every muscle in his body screamed to do so. Instead, he watched, silent, the weight of his own secrets pressing down on him. It was days later, when anger had cooled into exhaustion, that Maya made the discovery that shattered what fragile trust had begun to grow. It happened by accident. She had been discharged for the weekend, her first brief escape from the suffocating white walls of the hospital. Adrian had insisted on driving her home. She wanted to refuse, but fatigue had won. The ride had been quiet, his presence filling the car with an intensity that made words unnecessary. When they reached her flat, he carried her bag inside without asking. That was when she saw it. She had gone to fetch a blanket from her cupboard, but the bag he carried spilled open on the floor. Among the papers inside, something unfamiliar caught her eye. A file folder, thick and worn. Before he could stop her, she bent down and pulled it free. Her breath caught. Inside were pages, dozens of them, medical records, photos, doctor's notes. Her name stared back at her from every sheet. Her diagnosis, her treatments, even scans she didn't remember taking. Her voice broke, sharp and raw. "What is this?" Adrian stiffened, his face pale but controlled. "Maya!" "No!" She cut him off, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. "These are my files, my life. How do you have this?" He stepped closer, his hand outstretched. "It's not what you think, not what I think." She laughed, but it came out like a sob. "You've been spying on me, keeping records, like I'm some project you need to study." Her hands shook as she turned another page, and then she saw it. Her sister's name. The breath left her lungs. Her late sister, the one she still dreamed of, the one whose absence still ached like an open wound. Her name was there, printed neatly in black ink, attached to a file Adrian Cole had no right to hold. Her eyes lifted, wide with horror. "Why is her name here?" she demanded. Adrian froze. For the first time, the mask slipped, and something raw flickered in his gaze. Pain, memory, regret. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Because your sister once saved my life." Maya staggered back, clutching the file to her chest. "What are you talking about?" He exhaled slowly, as if the words cost him more than he could afford. "Years ago, I was in that hospital. I was lost, broken. She found me, not as a nurse, not as a doctor, as herself. She said words that kept me alive when I was ready to give up. I never forgot her face." His voice faltered. He took a step closer, desperation bleeding into his usually steady tone. "And then I saw yours, the same eyes, the same fire. I couldn't stay away." Maya shook her head, her heart racing. "No, no, this is insane. You don't even know me. Everything you've done, it's because of her, not me." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not true." But the words rang hollow in her ears. Her hands dropped the file, papers scattering like fallen leaves across the floor. Her chest heaved as betrayal consumed her. "I thought I was finally seen," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. "Not followed, not compared, not chosen because of someone else." "Maya, get out!" Her voice cracked, but her eyes blazed with fury. "Get out, Adrian. I don't want your pity. I don't want your ghost chasing mine." For a long, excruciating moment, he didn't move. His eyes searched hers, silently begging her to understand, to believe him. But she turned away, her shoulders shaking. Finally, he bent down, gathering the scattered papers into the file. He placed it gently on the table, his hand lingering there as though leaving a piece of himself behind. Then, without another word, he walked out. The door clicked shut, and Maya collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her hands, feeling more alone than she ever had before. The silence that followed Adrian's departure was not empty. It was crushing. It filled the walls of Maya's small flat, pressed against her chest until she could hardly breathe. The file sat on the table, its edges frayed from her trembling hands, mocking her with every secret it contained. She wanted to throw it away, to burn it, to erase everything it revealed. But she couldn't. It was the proof that her life, her pain, her sister's memory had been catalogued and kept in the private possession of a man she thought might have seen her for who she was. Days passed in a haze. She ignored her phone, silenced the buzzing of endless calls. Adrian tried at first, short messages, never pleading, always restrained. "Please let me explain. You don't know the whole story." Then the calls stopped, and his absence was louder than his presence had ever been. Maya told herself she should be relieved. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? To reclaim her life, to cut ties with a man who had never truly looked at her, only through her, back toward a ghost of someone she'd lost. But every night when she lay in bed, exhaustion pulling her body into heaviness, her mind betrayed her. She thought of his voice in the rain. "You don't deserve to be invisible." She thought of his quiet presence, the way he sat with her in silence, the rare flicker of warmth in his otherwise cold eyes when she laughed. And she hated herself for missing him. Her treatments grew harder. Her body weakened, her reflection more fragile with every day that passed. The nurses whispered less now. They had already judged her once, when the tabloids screamed their ugly headlines. Now they treated her with the same sterile pity as before. But Maya felt the difference. She was no longer the mystery patient with a billionaire's gaze fixed on her. She was back to being invisible. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hospital windows, Maya overheard two doctors in hushed conversation just outside her room. She had been drifting in and out of sleep, but their words pierced through the fog. "Trial abroad. Revolutionary procedure. But it's expensive, astronomical. Only a handful of patients are even being considered. Someone has already covered her costs, entirely anonymous. Paperwork went through this morning." Maya's eyes shot open. Her pulse quickened. She sat up too fast, the room spinning, her body rebelling against her urgency. Anonymous, covered, abroad. She knew instantly who it was. Adrian. Her fists clenched the thin blanket around her as tears burned her eyes. Rage and gratitude warred within her chest, twisting her insides. She wanted to scream. He had invaded her life, broken her trust, and still he was there, reaching into her future, reshaping it without her consent. When her doctor confirmed it later that night, his voice calm and measured, Maya barely heard him. The trial was real, the hope was real, but so was the truth she couldn't escape. Adrian had given it to her. She pressed her palms to her face and wept, the sound raw and unrestrained. How could she hate him for saving her? How could she forgive him for betraying her? The next days blurred. Arrangements were made quickly. The trial could not wait. Within weeks, she was on a plane, her frail body supported by nurses, her heart heavier than her luggage. She looked out the small window as the city shrank beneath her, wondering if somewhere, hidden from sight, Adrian was watching her leave. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she wanted nothing more to do with him, but the lie tasted bitter every time she repeated it. The clinic abroad was stark and sterile, but hope pulsed through its halls like a living thing. Patients arrived from across the world, each carrying their own story of desperation, each clinging to the fragile possibility of survival. Maya kept to herself, avoiding small talk, drowning in the endless cycle of procedures, medications, and uncertainty. But loneliness pressed in from every corner. At night, when sleep eluded her, she imagined Adrian's voice reading quietly from one of his books. She saw his hand, steady and warm, lifting her from the rain-soaked pavement, and she hated the way her heart ached for him, even after everything. The treatments were brutal. Some days she thought her body would shatter under the weight of them. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her skin pale, her eyes sunken, and wondered if this was worth it. If life could still hold meaning beyond hospital walls and sterile hallways. And then, slowly, imperceptibly, something began to change. The scans shifted. The doctors smiled more often. A word she hadn't dared hope for whispered its way into her room. Remission. Maya cried when she heard it, not the soft tears of relief, but the deep, shaking sobs of someone who had carried death on her shoulders and suddenly felt it slip free. She cried for the years stolen, for the pain endured, for the miracle she hadn't expected. But even in that moment of triumph, her thoughts betrayed her. She thought of Adrian, of the file, the lies, the betrayal, but also of the trial, the chance at life she would never have had without him. Weeks turned into months. Maya grew stronger, her hair beginning to sprout again in soft wisps. She laughed with the nurses, walked longer distances, breathed without pain. The world, once grey and suffocating, began to reveal colour again. And still, the question haunted her. What now? Her phone, unused for months, lay in her drawer. She could call him. She could tell him she was alive, that she had survived because of him. She could scream at him for everything he had done, or she could thank him. Maybe both, but every time her fingers hovered over the device, she froze. Because forgiveness was not simple, because trust was not easily mended, because love, if that was what it was, terrified her more than death ever had. One evening, standing on the balcony of her temporary apartment, she let the wind whip against her face and whispered into the night. "What am I supposed to do?" The city below offered no answers. The sky remained silent, but deep inside, Maya knew the truth she was too afraid to admit. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choice, and sooner or later, she would have to make it. 1 year later, the world looked different. Or perhaps it was Maya who had changed, who now carried new eyes, unclouded by despair. She stood barefoot on the soft sand of a Grecian beach, the waves curling at her toes, warm sunlight spilling across her skin. The wind tugged at her short hair, still fragile, still growing, but hers. She lifted her face to the sky, breathing deeply, filling her lungs with air that no longer carried the metallic tang of chemotherapy. Every breath felt like proof, like a small miracle. Maya had survived, against statistics, against her own fear, against the nights she had wanted to give up. She was here, alive, whole, though not untouched. The scars remained, inside and out, but they no longer defined her. They told her story. And for the first time, she was not ashamed of it. Behind her, laughter carried across the beach, children chasing kites, couples strolling hand in hand, tourists snapping photos. It all blurred into a hum of life around her. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her, grounding herself in the knowledge that she belonged here among the living. Yet even as joy filled her chest, a shadow lingered, not of illness, but of a man she could not forget, Adrian. She had not seen him since the night she threw him out of her apartment. Not a word, not a glimpse, though she had felt his presence in every moment of her survival. His gift had followed her through each procedure, each fragile step back toward life. And though she had tried to bury the memory of him, it always resurfaced, in her dreams, in her solitude, in the silence of her victories. She had rehearsed speeches in her head for months, words of gratitude, words of anger. Sometimes she wanted to scream at him, to demand why he had lied, why he had tied her life to a past she had never asked to inherit. Other times she wanted to whisper thank you, to admit that without him she would not be standing here at all. But every speech dissolved into the same ache, the same truth she had been too afraid to face. She missed him. Maya opened her eyes, and her breath caught. He was there. Adrian stood at the edge of the beach, not far from her, his dark suit stark against the brightness of the sand, as though he had stepped from another world entirely. In his hand was a bouquet of wildflowers, uneven and imperfect. Nothing like the polished roses she might have expected from him. His eyes, so often cold and guarded, searched for hers with an intensity that froze her in place. For a moment, neither moved. The distance between them was more than physical. It was a year of silence, of unspoken words, of wounds unhealed. and yet the pull was undeniable, stronger than pride, stronger than fear. Maya's feet carried her forward before her mind had even decided. The sand shifted beneath her steps, her pulse racing as the space closed. When she stood before him, close enough to see the faint tremor in his hands, she still found no words. Adrian broke the silence first. His voice, low and rough, held none of the certainty she once associated with him. "You're alive." A shaky laugh escaped her, more tears than humor. Disappointed. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. Never. The flowers in his hand shook slightly before he extended them toward her. She hesitated, staring at them, then at him. They weren't grand or flawless. They were fragile, just like her. She reached out and took them, her fingers brushing his. The touch sent a shiver through her, awakening memories she had tried to bury. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the ocean filling the space between words. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice trembling. "Why did you do it, Adrian? The trial, the money, all of it. Why?" His eyes held hers, unflinching, though pain flickered there like a wound not yet healed. "Because I owed your sister a debt I could never repay. And because when I saw you, it wasn't just her face I remembered, it was yours. You carried her fire, her defiance. But you were more than that. You... Her chest tightened, torn between anger and longing. "You should have told me." "I know." His voice cracked, rare vulnerability breaking through his control. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me as a man chasing ghosts instead of a man who couldn't stop falling for you." Maya's breath hitched. The world seemed to narrow, the sound of the ocean fading beneath the pounding of her heart. She wanted to reject his words, to remind him of the betrayal, the pain. But her heart whispered a different truth, one she could no longer deny. "I hated you," she whispered. "I hated that file, that lie. But when I was gone, when I was fighting, I missed you." Adrian's hand rose slowly, hesitantly, as though asking for permission. When she didn't pull away, his fingers brushed her cheek, the same gesture from the night in the rain. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if he feared she might vanish. "You're still the most beautiful person I've ever seen," he said softly. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't born of pain. She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. "And this time," she whispered, her voice steady despite the quiver in her chest, "I choose to be seen." He pulled her into his arms then, and she let herself fall against him, the weight of a year's worth of fear and longing dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. Around them, the beach carried on. Children laughed, waves crashed, the world spun. But for Maya and Adrian, time stilled. There were no cameras, no headlines, no whispers of scandal. Just two souls, scarred but unbroken, choosing each other in the aftermath of storms that had nearly destroyed them both. Maya lifted her face, looking up into his eyes. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small, fragile. Adrian's lips curved, faint but real. "Now, we start again. No lies, no ghosts, just us." She searched his eyes, and for the first time, she saw no secrets there, only truth, raw and unguarded. She smiled through her tears, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Then let's begin," she said, and on that sunlit beach, with the sea as witness and the scars of their past behind them, they did. Sometimes, love finds us when we least expect it, when we are at our weakest, when hope feels lost. Maya's story reminds us that even through scars and silence, we can be seen, truly seen, by someone who dares to look deeper. What about you? Do you believe love can heal wounds that life has left behind? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't go anywhere. The next story is already waiting for you on the screen.